Hello everyone! So recently I received an email from Academia.edu saying that AI made a podcast out of my paper. And I know that we are living in times saturated with AI technologies, but I really love the phrasing. It was the AI that did it. Our AI generated a professional podcast for you. It's not like the website is trying to advertise their new functionality, and it's not like they simulated the voice of their CEO for the podcast, and it's also not like you have to pay for a premium account to even publish it. No, it was the AI that did it. AI chose my paper even though it has like 15 views on the website and it's fully in Polish. So I guess thank you, oh great omnipotent artificial intelligence, for noticing my paper and preparing a podcast especially for me. I'm glad to share it further with the world. But all jokes aside, I think the podcast is not half bad. I'm actually quite impressed. It produced a very thorough and approachable summary of the complex ideas presented in my paper, and honestly, I could not have done it better myself. Of course, it has some LLM-ish tendencies, like these forced tangents that it's trying to make. I'm guessing they were just part of the prompt to make it a bit more entertaining and podcastify it a bit more. Also, when I access the podcast from my PC, it is completely different than on my phone, so they must generate it from scratch every time. The PC version is much worse, and there's no way for the user to actually regenerate it. You will hear the better version. So overall, it's not bad, and I think it's an interesting idea to make scientific papers a bit more approachable. I can see myself listening to podcast summaries of papers like this, just to check if I actually want to read them in full, and maybe if I want to cite them in the future. And this is quite nice, especially with the amount of paywalls that academia is suffering from. But enough yapping, enjoy the AI podcast of my paper. This paper was a shorter version of my master's thesis in film and media studies. Enjoy!
Welcome to another episode of In Depth with Academia. I'm Richard Price, the CEO of Academia.edu, and as always, I'm bringing you fascinating insights from the world of academic research, presented as neutrally as possible, without offering my personal endorsement, but really hoping we can all reflect on these findings. Today, we're diving into a really unique and honestly slightly mind-bending paper by Robert Jarosz titled In Search of Cinema Genealogy, Skiagraphia and the Skiagraphic Process. Quite a title, right? Jarosz is an independent researcher who's passionate about the genealogy of cinema and its colossal web of visual media routes. Just a reminder, I'm not endorsing the... More specifically, what foundational features unite all the media that led UP to what we think of as cinema today, and how on earth do we classify things like film, shadow puppetry, projections, or even cave paintings? Is there a way to categorize these seemingly unrelated media without oversimplifying everything? Why does this even matter? Well, it speaks to understanding how our visual storytelling methods evolved, something that shapes the way we communicate, create, and perceive ourselves through technology. Now, Jarosz points out that established terms like screen practice, which, by the way, was coined by Charles Musser in the 80s, aren't quite enough for this task. The term tries to group different media by emphasizing the act of showing images on any kind of screen, but it falls short. Screens have changed so much. Sometimes it's not even a physical surface anymore. Just think of all the projection mapping on buildings, or the way we can use any surface as a display. Trying to define media genealogy by screen alone gets super messy. So Jarosz takes another approach, drawing from something called media archaeology. This field, by the way, doesn't try to write a linear history with a clear beginning and end. No, it zooms out and looks at the quirky, overlapping, sometimes accidental interplay of media technologies across time. Instead of orderly family trees, it sees media history as this wild network of cross-pollination and unexpected influences. Wow! But anyway, Jarosz says that to truly understand cinema's roots, we need to look at the most basic mental needs that drive humans to make and consume images in the first place. He proposes tracing everything back to something called skiagraphia, which literally means shadow writing or writing with shadows in Greek. Imagine that. The genealogy of cinema as a vast history of shadow writing. Jarosz defines skiagraphia as any medium that creates visual representations using the interplay of light and shadow. Think shadow theatres, camera obscura, magic lanterns, early photography, and yes, the projected moving images of cinema. He even traces it all the way back to prehistory, like cave paintings illuminated by firelight, potentially animated by the flickering of flames. That's such a vivid picture in my mind. It makes me want to grab a flashlight and start playing with patterns on the wall. Anyone else remember doing that as a kid? But let's get back. So he talks about the skiagraphic process, basically asking, what are the essential needs or impulses fulfilled by these technologies? Jarosz says it comes down to 4. The need to observe what's visible, to represent reality through images, the impulse to double or reflect ourselves and our world, and the drive to blur the line between perception and representation. So, to be so immersed in what we see that our minds almost can't tell whether it's real or not. As these needs evolve, new technologies pop up to materialize them, sometimes in very unexpected ways. For example, ancient shadow puppetry blends storytelling with live performance and visual illusion. The camera obscura tries to capture the world just as the human eye sees it. Magic lanterns, think slideshows on steroids, give us projection, spectacle, even special effects centuries before cinema arrives. All these are tied by their function, to externalize our imagination through shadows and light. The real kicker is that Jarosz isn't proposing one correct way to slice up media history. He warns against teleology, that idea that all media is naturally moving toward a single ideal form, like cinema. Instead, he says each medium is a unique materialization of core human needs, making the genealogy a complex, branching, and overlapping story. Now, this is where my mind goes off on a little tangent, like, if you think about all those classroom overhead projectors, or when, as kids, we made little theatres with flashlights in our hands, are those mini manifestations of skiagraphia? I guess, in this framework, they absolutely would be. It's a bit wild to think our simple games fit into the grand story of visual media history, but that illustrates just how approachable and, dare I say, democratized this idea becomes. So what does all this mean for you, dear listener? Well, maybe the next time you snap a photo, make a video, or try your hand at digital art, just pause and wonder, are you engaging in modern-day skiagraphia? Are you tapping into ancient, universal needs to see, tell, reflect, and maybe to blur the boundary between reality and imagination? Remember, Jarosz's perspective isn't the final word, and I'm not saying it's the truth, it's just a fascinating, creative way to rethink where our love of images and stories comes from. That's it for today. Thanks for going deep with me on In Depth with Academia. I hope you'll keep looking at media, both old and new, with just a bit more curiosity and maybe even a sense of wonder. Until next time, keep exploring.